Private school vouchers are a scam that will take our tax dollars out of our underfunded public schools and give those tax dollars to unaccountable private schools that primarily serve the wealthy few.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Let's talk about what happened in Texas. So Texas has all but passed a school voucher scam. That's really, really problematic. I think it's going to be really bad for the state. And Robin Hayden mentioned Alabama's school voucher scam during our legislative update. And, you know, she talked about how this is going to be ultimately a giveaway to the wealthy. And I can't remember exactly the word she used. But somebody emailed me and said that, you know, he was upset with the characterization because right now, you know, there's an income cap. And that's true. That is true right now. So I don't know if she said right now it's a giveaway to the rich, that's probably not exactly accurate.
That's clearly where it's going.
That is where it's going.
Yes. And when you have, and just to be clear, yeah, the facts do bear out that this program is subsidizing people who are already attending private school.
Yes.
Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that all those people who are attending private school are wealthy. Mm-hmm. That is true. Yep. However, it is pretty clearly subsidizing people who are already in private school, which, by the way, is not really choice per se, right? You're just subsidizing their private choice with our public dollars. And yes, the income cap was a very temporary thing that is being removed. So yeah, I think it's pretty indisputable. If you look at the evidence across the country, state after state has tried this. And that's exactly what these are. These are meant to put more public dollars into private pockets, particularly the wealthy. And it is meant to undermine public education.
And we're going to talk about like the mechanisms by which it does that. But I want to mention that, you know, he said, I've been listening, paying attention to your show and the guests you have on as much as I can. And today's guest made me realize I'm not your target audience. And he goes on to say, because we disagree on the school voucher stuff. And I just want to say, I hope that the person is still listening. You know, I think that this is a radio person, so, you know, I'll send them the clip when we clip this. But I just want to, like, foot stomp, underline, underscore that is not true. We spend so much time and so much energy. We could just do a podcast, right? If we wanted to reach people that agreed with us, we could just do a podcast and our lives would be so much easier. It would be so, and at this point, we've been doing this radio program for 5 years. If we were to do a podcast, it might even do better online if we put all of our resources into online content, and reach as many people as that already agree with us as possible, then it might even be a better product ultimately. But we don't do that specifically because we want to reach people on conservative radio stations, on liberal radio stations, on sports radio stations that don't agree with us. Because we are a union-first program, and unions are, you know, like one of the most kind of ideologically diverse groupings of people that you can get in modern American society. And so because we feel like the importance of reaching people who don't agree with us, we spend a lot of time and energy to raise the money to be on radio stations, so we reach people like you that may not agree with us on these other issues. And we're going to talk about these other issues because we believe that they are union issues. These are, you know, these school voucher scams. We think they're bad for the community. We think that they are bad for the people who work in the schools. We think that they are bad for the children who go to public schools and the children who go to private schools. And so, therefore, we think it's a working class issue, and we're going to talk about it, and we're going to try to persuade you about that. But whether we are successful in that persuasion effort or not, you are still our target audience, and we do want you to unionize wherever you're at. And that is the beauty of unions, that you can agree to disagree on almost everything under the sun. But do you agree that your coworkers and you deserve higher wages? Do you believe that you and your coworkers deserve a dignified retirement? Do you believe that you and your coworkers should have a safe workplace and not have to worry about whether or not you are going to be able to make it home at the end of your day when you clock out, right? Those are the things that you and your coworkers need to agree on to be able to form a successful and powerful and democratic and militant union, and everything else, you can hash it out. And that's what we want to do. And so we're union first. We're going to talk about the unions, and we're going to be reaching out to people who disagree with us, but we are also going to be advocating on behalf of other issues that are outside of some workplaces, but I mean, schools are workplaces for thousands of people in this state, right? And so it's a union issue in that way, like directly, but it is also the democratic position of the labor movement, right? I mean, we're not just freelancing on this stuff, right? I mean, this is the position of the labor movement, that school vouchers are bad for our members' communities, and for our members' children, right? And so we are talking about it in that way. But, and so we're going to talk about it, but whether or not you agree with us on that, then we can still agree that you deserve a union because you deserve higher wages and your boss is screwing you over, right?
Right. And before we move on from that, I do want to say I appreciate the email.
I do.
I really
Yes.
appreciate when we hear from people who do not agree, because I'm 100%, in agreement with you on this. And this is why we do it the way we do it, because we do want to reach the masses of working class people who are not currently convinced that organizing is the way to move forward. We want to reach people who do disagree with us on particular issues. I opened up the show talking about the climate crisis and the environment. I'm sure there are workers out there who disagree. In fact, I know there are union workers out there who disagree. That's okay. Hopefully we can have good faith dialogue about how to move things better and move things forward. But we take a working class perspective and analysis here, and that's really, the spirit in which we enter into these kind of political debates and cover the news. It's what is relevant to working class people. How does it affect working class people? What's our position in these battles, and who's winning, who's losing in terms of working people versus everyone else, the bosses and the owners. And so if you are a working class person, you're our target audience. Now, if you're a business owner, a lawyer, a lobbyist, or other, person who's not particularly in the working class, you're welcome to tune in. We don't charge. And hopefully you'll learn something and appreciate our perspective. I mean, I know that there are business owners and lawyers and other folks out there who are sympathetic with the working class. We welcome well-to-do class traders. If you are some big CEO, or you're a powerful lawyer or lobbyist or something, and for whatever reason you're sympathetic with working people, then by all means we'll appreciate your support, if you stand in solidarity with us. But that's what it's really about, is the solidarity of working people and recognizing that there is a difference. There's a difference when we have a union involved. There's a difference when we don't talk about class, right? Because class is going to be there whether we talk about it or not. And a lot of folks in the media, especially talk radio, but in conservative media, but media generally doesn't really approach issues from a class perspective, or to the extent that they do, it's from the ruling class perspective, the owners of the media, the owners of the advertising companies, right? Not regular working folks like us, the vast majority of people who have to clock in and clock out, who have to report to a boss, who have to sell their labor, whether it's through their mind or through their body or a bit of both, right? Most of us have to go to work for a living. We don't own property that makes money. We don't have enough money in the bank and in the investment markets to just sit on that, right, and live off that. We have to go work for wages and salaries. That's how we feed our families. And so we have a mutual interest there. We have a shared interest. We want better lives for ourselves, our families, our future. That's what it's about. So if you do disagree on certain issues, that's great. We welcome the dialogue. I mean, the cool thing about this project is that we do have a pretty diverse audience. We've had people call into the show who are conservative, people who call into the show who are communist, and everything in between on that pretty large left-right spectrum, right? And we think that's important to be able to host conversations like that and just provide a platform for working people. So, not everyone who appears on our show agrees with everything we do. Not everyone who's even donated or sponsored the show agrees with everything we do. That's okay. We try to have that independent voice for working people and call them like we see it. Doesn't mean we're always right, but we speak from the heart.
Absolutely. So let's play this clip from a Texas legislator about why he thinks vouchers are bad, which we agree with.
Private school vouchers are a scam that will take our tax dollars out of our underfunded public schools and give those tax dollars to unaccountable private schools that primarily serve the wealthy few. Greg Abbott is calling this school choice, which sounds great. I think all of us are for school choice, but this is not school choice. It's the school's choice, because private schools can deny admission to any kid for any reason they want. So how is it choice when the private school has all the power? How is it choice when a majority of counties in the state of Texas don't have a single private school in them? How is it choice when private schools don't have to provide special education services or transportation? And how is it choice when the voucher doesn't even cover the full cost of tuition at most private schools in Texas? So, I used to be a middle school teacher before I ran for office. I taught on the west side of San Antonio, which is one of the poorest zip codes in our state. If you gave my former students on the west side of San Antonio a $10,000 voucher, there's still no way they could afford a $20,000 a year tuition bill. But here's the catch. That wealthy family that is already sending their kid to a $20,000 a year private school, they're eligible for this program too. And so they're going to get a discount, a $10,000 discount at our expense. That's why I call vouchers welfare for the wealthy. And that's why I'm encouraging all Texans to call their representatives and tell them to reject this scam and fully fund our public schools.
And so, like I said, the bill has passed, and now it waits for the governor's signature, I think, is where we're at. And so this is all but done, and this is going to siphon $1 billion out of the Texas public school system next year. And it's kind of got a rollout plan like Alabama's did. It's first, prioritizing eligibility for low income and disabled children. But then it's going to be universal. When it becomes universal, Texas could be looking at $4 to $5 billion every year being pulled out of their public school system into, like this legislator said, unaccountable private schools. And, the person who reached out to us and said that he didn't like our position on private schools, he said that, they send their child to a private Christian school because we don't like or agree with some of the things that public schools teach and push on children. And it's like, I'm a product of Alabama public schools. Not that long ago. 2015 is when I graduated, right? So I guess, a lot can happen in 10 years, but it's kind of not a bastion of woke. I'll say that. Why should other people give money to explicitly religious schools, right? Like, why should I pay for a Christian school, right? We should have a public education system that respects people's religious freedom and doesn't impose something on that. There's a First Amendment that explicitly says we should not be giving preference to a religion. And I think giving a bunch of money to a Christian school sounds, something like a violation of the First Amendment in spirit, if not in fact.
Listen.
And then also saying that you don't like public schools because you don't get a say in them. And that's just like, I don't get a say in the private school because these private schools right now are unaccountable. They're not regulated. And you actually do get a say in the public schools. You get to vote on your on the school board member and stuff like that, on the legislators, on the governor. So the idea that people don't have a say in public schools is wild. But the fact remains, when these things become universal, as they have in a few other states, the vast majority of money goes to people that are already wealthy. It does not benefit low-income students, and it hurts the system, right? If we want to talk about a way to improve the public education system, it is not by defunding it. I'm sorry, Adam, you tried to...
No, there's a couple of things that stand out there. For one, I don't get to decide that the city's parks aren't good enough for me, and I should go to the country club, and you get to pay for it. Okay? Like, if the city's swimming pool is not acceptable for me and my family, I can choose not to participate in that, right? I can choose not to go there. But my taxes are still going to fund it. And it would be unreasonable. And I don't think anyone, except for the most extreme libertarian types, could imagine a world where I should get a subsidy or a voucher to take my family to the country club swimming pool instead of the public pool. It's just, that's not how we fund operations as a society. There's a lot of things that the police do that I disagree with, like killing people who are innocent. Okay?
Wow,
I know that's a hot take. I know it's very woke of me. I did go to a public school, so maybe that's
that's right.
Maybe that's what happened.
Yeah.
But, there are things that they do that I disagree with. I don't get to apply to the state of Alabama for like a home security voucher. I can't say I opt out of the police. Actually, I'm not going to participate with the police. Y'all don't have to come to my house. I won't call you. And instead, the state should give me $7,500 a year to implement my own home security system. We don't do that. Okay. And so the public school system, I agree with what you're saying. It's not some bastion of propagandizing and all that, evangelizing. I just don't see that. But to your point, like, we shouldn't, if we're going to engage in this, understand that people of other faiths that you disagree with will also engage in this. People of other beliefs that you don't like will also set up their own schools and expect the tax dollars will subsidize that. So that is a problem. I mean, in the public education system, if you want me to say that it's flawed and it could be better, absolutely. I worked as a public educator. I spent over 5 years representing education employees. I've seen the dark side of, school systems. I've seen how messy it can get. I can see the politics. And is there a room for improvement? Absolutely. Should there be more transparency, more democratic accountability and input? Yes, absolutely. The solutions to all these issues, the solutions to whatever flaws currently exist in the public school system is not to defund them. It is not to take children and funding away from these schools into unaccountable private institutions, often religious institutions. That is not the answer to it, right? And I think some people are into this because, especially here in a place like Alabama, and I imagine Texas is not so different, a lot of us can think of public schools that didn't do great, right? That didn't do a great job. We can think of that. We can think of some of the issues in our current school systems and think, well, maybe an alternative isn't so bad. But it's, taking a system that is imperfect and making it worse. And it's, I think it's this vicious cycle where they tell us the schools are failing. They tell us the schools are a problem. They underfund and undercut the schools, right? So then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, and then they can point to it and say, see, we told you the schools were broken. That's why you need the vouchers. It's a very vicious cycle, and ultimately, it's not about what's good for kids. It's really, really not. It's about what lines people's pockets, whether it's contracting out inside the school systems or setting up private systems outside of it through vouchers and other means. It's never about what's actually good for regular kids, especially for the most marginalized kids, kids who have disabilities, kids who do not speak English as their first language, kids coming from impoverished backgrounds. Those are not the kids that the private academies want, right? Maybe they'll take 1 or 2 athletes, but that's it. They're not interested in providing special education services and free lunch and breakfast. They're not interested in those sorts of things. And if there are private schools out there who do that, good for them. Still doesn't mean we should subsidize it as the public. We have a public education system, and we should take care of that. Like, that should be the priority. So it's just very, very, very frustrating to see this, because they always use children as political pawns. And having been an educator, it really, really grosses me out.
One of the things that legislator, one of the points that he made was also that, like, most counties in Texas and in every state in the country do not have a single private school option, because it is not sustainable to have little private schools in every single county.
I mean,
you just
90%.
can't do that. It's not profitable.
90% of kids already go to a public school system. And, and here's another thing that they don't want to talk about in this whole conversation. Where did all these private schools that do exist come from? The 1950s and the 60s. Seems like there's a correlation, right, with these segregation academies, which, now they may run from that label. But a lot of these schools, that's what they were, segregation academies. And for a lot of the people pushing this agenda, it is about segregation, whether it's segregation by race, segregation by ability, segregation by religion, segregation by class. That is the beauty of public schools, is they take every kid. The Statue of Liberty says, "Give me your tired, huddled masses," blah, blah, blah. Well, the public schools are about the closest thing we have to actually, like, living up to that. Because any kid who shows up through those doors is entitled to a free, appropriate public education, equitable with the rest of the kids in the building. Does it always happen like it should? Hell no. But the power of working people is how we make that better, not private profiteers.
Yeah. And I mean, that really is what's, the segregationist stuff is what was pushing this in the 50s and 60s. And now it's like anti-LGBT stuff. I mean, I've talked to basically every person that I've talked to in my personal life that is trying to pull their kids out of the public school system, or talking about when they have kids, they're going to pull their kids out of the public school system, is because of this LGBT stuff. And it's not, it's so, and, I'm going to offend people. It's not politically correct for me to say this, but it's just not the case that your kid is going to go to school and your teacher is going to trans them. What is going to happen is your teacher is going to tell your kid that they can't bully or be mean to kids who are gay, and that is less acceptable than it was when I went to high school. When I went to high school, the F slur was something that was utilized freely, and I don't think, I mean, I don't know, I don't talk to high school students, so I don't know, maybe it still is normal in some places, but that is what's happening, is that people are telling you that you can't bully LGBT folks and you have to respect them. And that is making some people uncomfortable, frankly. And, you just got to be uncomfortable. But anyway, so folks protested at the Capitol. Here's a clip of the protest in Texas.
No! Hey, 5 seconds, just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate.
So unfortunately didn't work, but really great to see folks protesting things like this. Left Reckoning, friends of the show, David Griscom lives in Texas. He talked about some of how this happened, and he points out that this was not like a popular groundswell. Even as you do have folks that do get up in arms about this stuff, like it's not a normal popular thing that like normal people want to see. And so since it's not been like a popular groundswell, there have had to be other points of pressure applied to Republican legislators in the state of Texas to get them to go along with this school voucher scam. David Griscom breaks it down.
This is not grassroots or an organic demand in the state of Texas. So this election, by the way, when Abbott and all of these like school privatization advocates started running insurgent candidates against incumbent Republicans, do you know what those ads were about, Matt? They weren't about school choice. They were all about the border and how so-and-so is weak on the border. Now, again, that was a completely fabricated thing. I just can't imagine. It is you are divorced from reality when you're talking about Texas Republicans at this point being quote unquote weak on the border. But that's what they ran on. Those were the kind of campaigns that they ran. And they're what they and it had very little to do, nothing to do with school vouchers. So again, because this is something that's not popular with Texans. When you poll Texans, overwhelmingly they are uninterested in the school voucher scam. It was something that's very contentious in Republican districts, in the first place. And what's so worrying about this is, one, the damage that this is going to do to education in Texas, the damage that this is going to do to children in Texas, because there's no oversight here, right? There's no oversight for all this talk of like protecting your kids and stuff that we're getting from the right. They want people in this state now to send their kids to unsupervised institutions, for-profit institutions. And I shudder thinking about all the horror stories that we're going to hear in the next few years. But anyways, this is not something that's coming from the grassroots. It's not something that's coming from Republicans. This is something that is coming from those at the very, very top and the donor class and people like Greg Abbott. And this is a Texas Republican who voted yes on the vouchers, right? Cowardly, I will add. But this is a very notable thing because it shows just how threatened these figures are. This is Jeffrey Berry on Facebook responding to a comment from a constituent who says, hey, you said you would not do this. You would not vote for vouchers if you got elected. And this is his response back to this woman, Jeffrey Berry, again, Republican alleged member here in Texas. The bill was passing regardless of my vote. If I had voted against it, I would have had every single statewide and national political figure against me, not to mention all of my bills vetoed. The consequences were dire with no upside at all. I understand your frustration and I'm disappointed in the outcome as well. If I would have voted against this, all of my bills and appropriations were at risk. We have some great things we have already done for the district, blah, blah, blah. He also says, another person who said this, I understand your frustration. I'm frustrated too. When the president calls into your caucus meeting, says he will oppose those that vote against the bill, it is a real problem. Did you see that announcement? Which, yes, Donald Trump called into the caucus meeting in the legislature and basically said as much that like we will destroy you if you vote against this. And this is
you were telling me like when you first read me last week what he said about that. I'm like, is he being dramatic or like what? What does he mean? He's gonna all your stuff's gonna get vetoed, but that's actually. That's actually a real threat.
No, this has happened. So this is something that I've reported in multiple places about Greg Abbott. And Greg Abbott is somebody who will veto bills out of spite. Things that, you would never think that they would touch. Funding of an animal shelter, foster kid like funding, all this kind of stuff will shut it down. And as shown, and remember, he's a tyrant governor. He's been governor for a very long time. And you've seen how weak the Democrats are at challenging him. The only people who could challenge him are the Republicans. And he's learned he's going to keep them on an extreme extremely tight leash, right? The fact that he was able to unseat people who are members of his own party, right? Members of the right have every like advantage that you can imagine in politics right now, shows just how strong he has become. And yes, he was directly threatening members of the legislature that they needed to listen to him, not to their own voters.
So there you go. I mean, that's how these things are happening. And here's another clip from Left Reckoning where he talks about some of the money that helped Greg Abbott make this happen.
I know everybody likes to talk about this stuff with Texas because for some reason Texas has become a completely mystified place in most people's minds. Yeah. There are folks like Tim Dunn, the billionaire, who definitely are trying to push a kind of crazy Christian nationalist view. I'm not saying to not take that threat seriously. But what frustrates me so much is when people don't realize that Texas is also a place to make a lot of fucking money. And this is not just, oh, now kids are going to be, having more religious education because we're pulling them out. So look, that's part of it for some folks. But the fact of the matter is that Texas is one of the largest states by population in the country. Our school system is in the billions. And that is something that is big dollar signs for wealthy people who want to make a lot of money from this. Jeff Yost, who is somebody who is who's a Pennsylvania billionaire, big-time GOP donor, somebody who's heavily invested in these school privatization efforts, both getting them passed and also, surprise, surprise, on the back end as well, right? So there's a whole host of people, these vendors, who are hoping that they're going to be able to make a lot of money by providing certain kind of materials to these schools, by outright owning these schools. Private systems mean plenty of boondoggles for private actors to take our public money. So we still have public money going into the system. We're still going to be paying taxes in the state of Texas. The difference is, instead of that money going to your public high school, right, or your middle school, elementary school, and educating this next generation, it's going to fly off to enter the bank account of some fucking rich asshole in Pennsylvania, right? This is the fundamental thing. It's all about the money. And liberals, unfortunately, I find, get really distracted because they want to talk about Christian nationalism. They want to talk about the Bible. They want to talk about all this kind of stuff. Don't get me wrong. I think that's bad. I get it. But the reason this kind of stuff happens is not because Texas became more religious in the past 30 years. It's because Republicans have cemented and gained so much control over our government that rich people say, hey, you know what? I need to get some extra money. I might as well see if I can shake that piggy bank down there in Texas, and I'll be able to buy it pretty cheaply. Greg Abbott, he also gave Greg Abbott something like $12 million, right? It was a lot of money. But when you think about the massive returns that him and his friends are going to be able to get from pilfering, robbing our public school system, it's nothing. It's a very, very small investment. And that is the fundamental reality as to why what we're seeing is happening here. And it's why it's happening everywhere else too.
Really appreciate that material analysis from David, because there's a lot of, it's there's a lot of, and we talked about some of the culture stuff that's tied up in this, but it really is, like most things, really grounded in what's materially going on, and the material interests of actors and the wealthy. And if it weren't for that, these sorts of things wouldn't be happening as frequently as they are. Because like David pointed out, there's just not the popular support for taking money from public schools and giving them to private schools, primarily to subsidize wealthy people. So I don't know if you have anything else to say on that, Adam, but I really appreciated David and them for that segment. Thought it was really good.
Yeah, absolutely. Follow the money. Always follow the money. And, it is unfortunate that there are folks, with beliefs that can be preyed on for this purpose, right? Because like the fellow who emailed you, it's not about the money for him, I don't think. I think he probably really believes that the public schools are, offending his way of life, and he's protecting his children. And I respect any parent who wants to protect their children. I mean, as
And
a parent, we all want that.
Yes,
but
and I just want to say also, he said he makes $25 an hour, his wife makes $18 an hour, and they sacrifice a lot to be able to send their kid to a private Christian school. And like,
that's a bummer. I'm sorry. I feel bad for you for making a bad choice.
I feel sorry that I think you're making a very bad financial decision, but I do respect like your willingness to sacrifice for what you perceive as like the good of your child.
Yeah.
And
I respect people who are willing to put their money where their mouth is, and you're doing that. And I do respect that. Even though I disagree with your beliefs, I respect your conviction, because there are a lot of people who just don't believe in much of anything. But yeah, I think you're wrong. I mean, and that's just the sad situation here is I think you're making a poor choice with limited resources, and it would be easier to just talk to your kids about what you believe and be strong in that and know that, yes, they're going to be exposed to things in a public school system. They're going to be exposed to people who are different, who aren't like you, who don't think like you, who don't look like you. But that's the world. That's part of why a public education is impactful. It's not so much always just the teaching and the instruction and the standards and this and that. A lot of it is just the acculturation to getting to know people who are different from you and learn how to function with other people who are different from you and move in a positive way into the world, right? Having had those experiences, having had to get to know people across diversity, because, maybe, the goal here is you'll never be exposed to these kind of people. You'll never have to encounter, racial minorities or gender minorities or, religious minorities. And maybe you'll live a secluded life and you can do that in your own, in your small world. But I think the reality is most people are going to be dealing with folks who are different from them, and you have to be able to learn to function that way and get along with people and work with people. And so that's part of, I think one of the assets of a public education is that diversity. I want my daughter to know that there are people who aren't like us, that there are people who look different, think different, and that is, part of learning and growing up, I think. So it is unfortunate that folks are so fearful of their children being exposed to critical thinking or diversity and inclusion. I mean, that really, it stings me as someone who is a father and a parent, because I don't get it. And I don't think it's the right thing to do. I really don't think it's the right thing to do. And I say that from my heart. And I respect people who think they're doing the right thing as well for their kids. But I don't think basic tolerance and acceptance, a restriction on bullying, awareness of people who are different. Like these are things that are not, if those threaten your worldview, if those threaten the stability of your ideology, maybe ask deeper questions. Maybe look inside, right? Because if that's all it takes is, oh, my kid saw a book and there was a gay character in the book and now they're woke. I mean, what does that say about you and what you think and your own process of raising your children and everything? It's very baffling to me. And I don't know. I'm almost at a loss for words with some of those folks, because I don't understand it and I don't get the fear, because it seems to be very fear-based. And I don't understand that at all, because getting to know people who are different from you, just like we said, we want to speak to people who think differently from us on this show. I mean, it's just that's part of life. I don't get it.
We got a caller on the line. Let's go ahead and bring him on the air. Caller from a 256 area code. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
This is Dwayne, former press secretary. Hello, Jacob. Hello, Adam. How y'all doing?
Yeah. Hey, Dwayne. Good to hear from you. What's on
you.
your mind?
Well, I wanted to, since you're talking about that, Adam, and this is going to be kind of out the deep end, but I want you guys to follow along with me here, okay?
All
Now,
right.
remember, I am conservative, but I'm not conservative when it comes to social issues. Have you got me?
Okay.
Now, you know how they've done the library as far as the Christian conservative movement headed toward libraries, particularly Prattville, I want to say. What we need to think about right there is if you had to percentage-wise look at how many children were actually harmed in a library, it's not very many. Would you guys tend to agree with me on that?
I think
I
you're
would
right.
probably agree with you. I mean, I'd have to fact check you on that, but
I trust your instinct on it.
It wouldn't be very many. Now, what I want to get to right here is if you look at the state of Alabama throughout a year, sometimes I would even say by the week, you have where Alabama Protestant churches did not go through what the Catholic churches did in regard to child abuse. Have you got me?
Oh, yeah.
They hid back. The Baptists, you get what I'm saying here. Now, you have more actual harm occurring in Protestant churches in Alabama from youth pastors, persons in the churches that take them come to the house for a camping. Now, that is actual terrible victimization that's happening. But you don't hear them say, we need to reorganize our churches for that's no longer possible to happen. We want you to organize the library, like we say, where there's nobody even getting hurt. In those libraries, it could be that they learned something that if they were going to be a victim in one of these Protestant churches, they would actually know, hey, I'm being victimized, instead of being ignorant to never know anything. Do you follow me there?
Yeah,
I do.
absolutely.
And I appreciate you bringing that up, Dwayne.
Yeah, and what I was going to say, there are terrible people. You can research for 26 children in the Florence, Sheffield area at the Highland Baptist Church were harmed irrevocably for all their life. But you don't hear them going on that. There's a guy named Daniel Wayne Crotch. If there had been a library across the street where these little boys would not have, they should have read about this, known maybe what this man was doing. I would rather them maybe read something in a library that stopped this than being ignorant. And furthermore, as far as the way that they did the vouchers, it should be if you make so many hundreds of thousands of dollars, your kid doesn't get a voucher. If you're already there and you make a lot of money, you shouldn't get a voucher. And in order to make equal protection rights right, it should be that children that have developmental challenge problems, y'all, should get a voucher that shows if their IQ, not their IQ, but their test results and their schooling at their regular school that they go to improves them over the year. That school gets the money. Are you following me? Merit-based. You hear them hollering merit-based all the time. Well, it should be that these poor families have someone to help them fill out these vouchers, and they're for the next year. And if the school that's a public school makes these children better that signed up, they get the money, just like you would give it to a private school, y'all. I just thought that might be some ideas that I could throw out there to try to help everybody look at the situation in a different way.
Yeah, Dwayne, appreciate your call. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Hey, thanks a lot.
Yeah, a couple things he mentioned that stood out. One is that, the public schools often have to take on cost associated with private students, right? Every year, the legislature is talking about bills that would say, oh, well, homeschool students and private school students can play sports at the local schools. They can go to the local career tech center. They can do this. They can do that. They can opt in and opt out, basically however they feel like it. And again, the public school systems are eating that cost. And then in terms of a really spicy issue he mentioned, in terms of the sexual abuse that is happening within faith institutions, that is a dark undercurrent to this conversation. And Griscom even mentioned unsupervised schools, right? And Dwayne's right. I mean, you look at it, the Moms for Liberty and these folks are going after the libraries where there does not appear to be any real victimization of children happening, just some books that people don't like, which, newsflash, go to the library with your kid. Ask them what they check out. I mean, that's crazy, but to his point, you've got a lot of folks who are in powerful positions within churches, just as in any other institution, who abuse that power and victimize people. And there's not a lot of accountability.
Right.
There has not been this full, digging beneath the surface and trying to rectify all this. And these are some of the same institutions that say, we're going to set up church schools, and you should pay for it, the taxpayer. That should give us some pause.
Well, and that's another problem with the consternation about sex ed stuff. And, I do believe that most of the people that have a problem with sex ed in schools, I don't think that they are kind of nefariously, rubbing their hands together, I'm going to prey on children. They have this view of children as innocent and, and they need to protect their purity. And so even discussing anything sexual with them is going to,
introduce impure thoughts.
Exactly. And, but the reality is, I saw some survey the other day that was like 30% of women are catcalled before they turn 11, right? And so if you are a 9 or a 10-year-old girl or boy, and you have your parents have, that's the time that parents need to start talking about this with their children. And yes, society needs to start talking about these things with their children, letting them know what is appropriate, what's not appropriate, most importantly, and what's going on. And it makes it easier to abuse children when they have no conception of sex education. You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.